You thought you were just lazy your whole life. But what if you were actually dealing with ADHD? You spent decades thinking you were lazy, unfocused, broken. And then one day, a doctor looked at you and said, "You have ADHD." In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside the mind of someone who gets that diagnosis as an adult, the psychology behind it, the hidden patterns they lived with for years, and why so many high-functioning people never saw it coming. Because here's what most people don't understand. Adult ADHD isn't just about being distracted. It rewires how you see yourself, how you relate to other people, and how you've been silently coping your entire life. And if you, or someone you love, is living with this right now, what you're about to learn could genuinely change how you see everything. Welcome to Minds Unlocked, where we break down the deepest layers of human psychology so you can understand yourself and the people around you on a level most people never reach. Today, we're going inside the psychology of adult ADHD diagnosis, not the surface-level stuff you've already heard, but the real, often invisible psychological experience of discovering this about yourself decades into your life. Let's get into it. Section 1. The moment everything makes sense and hurts at the SAM. There's a specific psychological phenomenon that happens the moment an adult receives an ADHD diagnosis. Psychologists call it biographical reframing, and it's one of the most emotionally complex experiences a human being can go through. Suddenly, every failed relationship, every job you quit, every deadline you missed, every time you sat in a room feeling like everyone else got the manual, and you didn't, it all snaps into focus. And that clarity, it hits two ways simultaneously: relief and grief. Relief because you finally have a name for it. Grief because you realize how many years you spent blaming yourself for something that was neurological, not moral. Research published in the Journal of Attention Disorders found that adults diagnosed later in life frequently report a profound sense of loss, mourning the version of themselves they could have been with earlier support. That's not weakness. That's a completely rational psychological response to realizing the game was harder for you than it was for everyone else, and nobody told you. Section 2. The mask they wore for decades. Here's something that almost never makes it into mainstream conversations about ADHD. Most adults who get diagnosed late weren't the hyperactive kid bouncing off the walls. They were the quiet ones, the daydreamers, the people who looked fine from the outside because they had spent years, sometimes decades, building a system of masks and compensations to hide what was happening inside. Psychologists call this masking, and it is exhausting in ways that are almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't lived it. Think about it this way. Imagine every single day you're running a program in the background of your mind just to appear normal, making lists, apologizing in advance, over-explaining yourself, arriving 30 minutes early because you know your sense of time is broken, laughing off things that quietly devastated you. That's not laziness. That's a person working twice as hard just to stay even. And here's the psychological damage that masking causes over time. When you perform normalcy long enough, you start to lose access to who you actually are underneath it. Your authentic self gets buried under layers of coping strategies, and that disconnection from self becomes its own psychological wound. Studies show that adults with undiagnosed ADHD report significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Not because ADHD causes those things directly, but because spending a lifetime being told you're not trying hard enough eventually makes you believe it. The identity crisis that comes after diagnosis. Here's something nobody prepares you for when you get diagnosed as an adult. The diagnosis doesn't end the confusion. In many ways, it starts a new one. Because now you have to ask yourself, who am I without the story I've been telling about myself? For years, maybe you identified as a procrastinator, a quitter, someone who was smart but just couldn't get it together. Those labels, as painful as they were, became part of your identity. And identity, even a painful one, gives us a sense of structure. When that structure gets pulled out from underneath you, even by good news, the mind goes into a kind of psychological freefall. Researchers describe this as identity reconstruction, the process of rebuilding your self-concept from the ground up using this new information. And it doesn't happen overnight. It can take months, sometimes years, because you're not just learning about ADHD, you're unlearning every cruel thing you ever said to yourself. You're learning that the reason you hyper-focused for 6 hours on something you loved while completely forgetting to eat wasn't a personality flaw. It was your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. You're learning that the emotional sensitivity you always felt, the way rejection hit you harder than other people, has a name: rejection-sensitive dysphoria, and it's one of the most underreported symptoms of ADHD in adults. That kind of relearning is deep psychological work, and it's work that most people never see from the outside. Section 4. The relationships that paid the price. Let's talk about something that gets almost no attention in mainstream ADHD content: the relational cost. Adults with undiagnosed ADHD don't just carry the weight themselves, they carry it into every relationship they've ever had. Partners who felt ignored, not because they weren't loved, but because attention regulation is genuinely, neurologically hard. Friends who thought they didn't matter because texts went unanswered for days. Colleagues who read disorganization as disrespect. And on the other side, the person with ADHD who internalized every single one of those reactions, who started to believe that they were too much for some people and not enough for others, simultaneously. Psychologists who work with adult ADHD patients consistently report that relational trauma, the accumulated damage from years of misattunement, is often as significant as the ADHD itself. The good news: understanding the neurology changes the narrative. When partners learn that the forgetting wasn't indifference, that the lateness wasn't disrespect, relationships that looked irreparable sometimes find a path forward. Awareness doesn't fix everything, but it removes the story that was doing the most damage. Section 5. What late diagnosis actually unlocks. Here, where I want to leave you, because this isn't a video about what ADHD costs people. It's a video about what understanding it unlocks. Adults who receive a late diagnosis and engage with it, really engage with it, often describe a transformation that goes beyond symptom management. They describe finally making peace with how their brain actually works, instead of fighting it every single day. And what researchers have found is genuinely remarkable. Many adults with ADHD possess what psychologists call a hyperfocus advantage, the ability to enter states of extraordinary concentration and creativity when working on something that activates their interest. This isn't a consolation prize. In the right environment, it's a superpower. They tend to be highly empathetic because they've spent their entire lives hyper-aware of how others perceive them. They tend to be innovative because their brains don't follow conventional linear paths. They tend to be resilient because they've been navigating a world not built for them their entire lives and they're still here. The diagnosis isn't a ceiling, it's a map. It tells you where you've been struggling, why you've been struggling, and for the first time, it gives you real tools instead of just harder effort. Because the problem was never that you weren't trying hard enough. The problem was that nobody handed you the right tools. If this video made something click for you, whether that's your own experience or someone you know, I want you to drop one word in the comments right now. Just one word that describes how you feel about this topic. Seen, relieved, angry, curious. Whatever it is, leave it below. I read every single one. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of how your mind really works, subscribe right now. Subscribe button appears on screen. We upload twice a week, and every video is built to give you real insight, not surface-level content. I'll see you in the next one.